But, and many of what you're talking about were kind of this general things which pretty much affected everything, electricity or internet, etc. But I don't think we've ever dealt with a technology, both which is progressing so fast, becoming so capable. It's not clear what the ceiling is. And the main unique, it's recursively self-improving, right? It's capable of that. And so the fact it's the first technology will kind of dramatically accelerate creation itself, like creating things, building new things, can improve and achieve things on its own, right? I think like puts it in a different league, right? And so different league. And so I think the impact it will end up having will far surpass everything we've seen before. Obviously, with that comes a lot of important things to think and wrestle with, but I definitely think that'll end up being the case.
Especially if it gets to the point of where we can achieve superhuman performance on the AI research itself. So it's a technology that it's an open question, but it may be able to achieve a level to where the technology itself can create itself better than it could yesterday.
It's like the move 37 of alpha research or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? Like, and when yeah, you're right. When it can do novel self-directed research, obviously for a long time we'll have hopefully always humans in the loop and all that stuff. And these are complex questions to talk about. But yes, I think the underlying technology, I've said this, like if you watched seeing AlphaGo start from scratch, be clueless, and like become better through the course of a day, really it hits you when you see that happen. Even our like the VO3 models, if you sample the models when they were like 30% done and 60% done and looked at what they were generating, and you kind of see how it all comes together, it's kind of like, I would say, it's kind of inspiring, a little bit unsettling, right, as a human. So all of that is true, I think.
Well, the interesting thing of the Industrial Revolution, electricity, like you mentioned, you can go back to the first agricultural revolution. There's what's called the Neolithic package of the first agricultural revolution. It wasn't just that the nomads settled down and started planting food, but all this other kind of technology was born from that, and it's included in this package. So it wasn't one piece of technology. There's these ripple effects, second and third order effects that happen. Everything from something profound, like pottery that can store liquids and food, to something we kind of take for granted, but social hierarchies, and political hierarchies. So like early government was formed because it turns out if humans stop moving and have some surplus food, they start coming up with they get bored and they start coming up with interesting systems, and then trade emerges, which turns out to be a really profound thing. And like I said, government there's just second and third order effects from that, including that package, is incredible and probably extremely difficult. If you ask one of the people in the nomadic tribes to predict that, it would be impossible. It's difficult to predict. But all that said, what do you think are some of the early things we might see in the quote unquote AI package?
I mean, most of it probably we don't know today, but like, the one thing which we can tangibly start seeing now is, obviously with the coding progress, you got a sense of it. It's going to be so easy to imagine, like thoughts in your head, translating that into things that exist. That'll be part of the package, right? Like it's going to empower almost all of humanity to kind of express themselves. Maybe in the past you could have expressed with words, but like you could kind of will things into existence, right? Maybe not fully today. We are at the early stages of vibe coding. I've been amazed at what people have put out online with VO3,
Mhm.
but it takes a bit of work, right? You have to stitch together a set of prompts, but all this is going to get better. The thing I always think about, this is the worst it'll ever be, right? Like at any given moment in time.
Yeah, it's interesting you went there as kind of a first thought. So the exponential increase of access to creativity?
Software creation. Are you creating a program, a piece of content for to be shared with others, games down the line? All of that like just becomes infinitely more possible.
Well, I think the big thing is that it makes it accessible. It unlocks the cognitive capabilities of the entire 8 billion.
No, I agree. Look, think about 40 years ago, maybe in the US, there were 5 people who could do what you were doing,
Hmm.
like go do a interview, but today, think about with YouTube and other products, etc. Like how many more people are doing it? So I think this is what technology does, right? Like when the internet created blogs, you heard from so many more people. So I think, but with AI, I think that number won't be in the few hundreds of thousands. It'll be tens of millions of people, maybe even a billion people, like putting out things into the world in a deeper way.
And I think it'll change the landscape of creativity. And it makes a lot of people nervous. Like, for example, whatever, Fox, MSNBC, CNN are really nervous about this part. Like, you mean this dude in a suit could just do this, and YouTube and thousands of others, tens of thousands, millions of other creators can do the same kind of thing. That makes them nervous. And now you get a podcast from Notebook LM that's about 5 to 10 times better than any podcast I've ever done.
Not true, but yeah.
I'm joking at this time, but maybe not. And that changes. You have to evolve because on the podcasting front, I'm a fan of podcasts much more than I am a fan of being a host or whatever. If there's great podcasts that are both AIs, I'll just stop doing this podcast. I'll listen to that podcast. But you have to evolve and you have to change. And that makes people really nervous, I think. But it's also a really exciting future.
The only thing I may say is I do think like in a world in which there are two AI, I think people value and choose, just like in chess. You and I would never watch Stockfish 10 or whatever and AlphaGo play against each. Like it would be boring for us to watch. But Magnus Carlsen and Gukesh, that game would be much more fascinating to watch. So it's tough to say. Like one way to say is you'll have a lot more content, and so you will be listening to AI generated content
Mhm.
because sometimes it's efficient, etc. But the premium experiences you value might be a version of like the human essence wherever it comes through. Going back to what we talked earlier about watching Messi dribble the ball, I don't know, one day I'm sure a machine will dribble much better than Messi, but I don't know whether it would evoke that same emotion in us. So I think that'll be fascinating to see.
I think the element of podcasting or audiobooks that is about information gathering,
Yeah.
that part might be removed, or that might be more efficiently and in a compelling way done by AI. But then it'll be just nice to hear humans struggle with the information, contend with the information, try to internalize it, combine it with the complexity of our own emotions and consciousness and all that kind of stuff. But if you actually want to find out about a piece of history, you go to Gemini. If you want to see Lex struggle with that history, then you look, or other humans, you look at that. But that's the point is, it's going to change the nature, continue to change the nature of how we discover information, how we consume the information, how we create that information. The same way that YouTube changed everything completely, changed news, and that's something our society is struggling with.
Yeah. YouTube enabled, I mean, you know this better than anyone else. It's enabled so many creators. There is no doubt in me that like we will enable more filmmakers than there have ever been, right? You're going to empower a lot more people. So I think there is an expansionary aspect of this, which is underestimated, I think it'll unleash human creativity in a way that hasn't been seen before. It's tough to internalize. The only way is if you brought someone from the 50s or 40s and just put them in front of YouTube, I think it would blow their mind away. Similarly, I think we would get blown away by what's possible in a 10 to 20 year time frame.
Do you think there's a future? How many years out is it that, let's say, let's put a marker on it, 50% of content in good content, 50% of good content is generated by VO4, 5, 6?
I think it depends on what it is for. Like, maybe if you look at movies today with CGI, there are great filmmakers. Like you still look at like who the directors are and who use it. There are filmmakers who don't use it at all. You value that. There are people who use it incredibly. Think about somebody like a James Cameron, like what he would do with these tools in his hands. But I think there'll be a lot more content created, like just like writers today use Google Docs and not think about the fact that they're using a tool like that. Like people will be using the future versions of these things. Like it won't be a big deal at all to them.
I've gotten a chance to get to know Darren Aronofsky well. He's been really leaning in and trying to figure out. It's fun to watch a genius who came up before any of this was even remotely possible. He created Pi, one of my favorite movies, and from there just continued to create a really interesting variety of movies. And now he's trying to see how can AI be used to create compelling films. You have people like that. You have people I've gotten to just know edgier folks that are AI first, like Door Brothers. Both Aronofsky and Door Brothers create at the edge of the Overton window of society. They push whether it's sexuality or violence. It's edgy, like artists are, but it's still classy. It doesn't cross that line, whatever that line is. Hunter S. Thompson has this line that the only way to find out where the line is by crossing it. And I think for artists, that's true. That's kind of their purpose. Sometimes comedians and artists just cross that line. I wonder if you can comment on the weird place that puts Google. Because Google's line is probably different than some of these artists. How do you think about specifically VO and Flow about like how to allow artists to do crazy shit, but also like the responsibility of like not for it not to be too crazy?
I mean, it's a great question. Look, you mentioned Darren, he's a clear visionary, right? Part of the reason we started working with him early on VO is he's one of those people who's able to kind of see that future, get inspired by it, and kind of showing the way for how creative people can express themselves with it. Look, I think when it comes to allowing artistic free expression is one of the most important values in a society, right? I think, artists have always been the ones to push boundaries, expand the frontiers of thought. And so, look, I think that's going to be an important value we have. So I think we will provide tools and put it in the hands of artists for them to use and put out their work. Those APIs, I mean, I almost think of that as infrastructure. Just like when you provide electricity to people or something, you want them to use it, and like you're not thinking about the use cases on top of it. So
it's a paintbrush.
Yeah, and so I think that's how. Obviously, there have to be some things, and society needs to decide at a fundamental level what's okay, what's not.